Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be talking about majoring in history and whether or not it's something that you should consider for your future. Now, many of you who are already in the liberal arts, or maybe you're considering going into the liberal arts or the humanities more specifically, you've probably considered history as a potential major. And one of the biggest reasons for this is we all have some level of exposure to the field of history because it is something that is introduced very early on in elementary school and is taught all the way through to secondary school as well. So at some point in our academic career, we've probably been required to take at least one history course. And as a result, going into our post secondary education, we have some level of understanding of what to expect from a history course and whether or not it's something that we're actually going to enjoy. For this reason, a lot of people look towards history as opposed to maybe some of the more obscure fields of the liberal arts that they don't already have some exposure to that they might discover at the post secondary level. Now, one of the biggest conundrums with a history degree, and for that matter, a lot of the other liberal arts majors as well, is whether or not it has any marketability or any transferability into any of the areas in the marketplace, and whether or not it's something that's even worth pursuing for 4 years at the given cost of many of the post secondary institutions. So I'm not here to debate that today, but I do want to talk about some of the specific areas that a lot of history grads gravitate towards. So whether you're a new history grad or you're somebody who is going to be graduating within the next year or two, you have some level of understanding of what exactly to expect and whether or not there are options for you in the marketplace. So I'm going to start off with probably one of the most common areas that you would hear history teachers or history grads talk about, which is actually going down the teaching route, being a history teacher either at the elementary school or secondary school level. Now, one of the benefits of this specific career path is regardless of where you are in the country, there are going to be elementary schools and secondary schools that are teaching history. And so there's potential employment opportunities regardless of where you're actually located. And perhaps maybe even more opportunities if you want to relocate to an area that happens to need more teachers in that specific subject area. The other reason why a lot of people gravitate towards this area is because it actually allows them to stay within the field. So they can actually implement a lot of the things that they've learned at the undergraduate level, and they can actually still, inspire others to think about history and to, pursue their passions if that happens to be history in the future as well. One of the drawbacks to this specific career path is it isn't necessarily as lucrative as some of the STEM fields might actually be, and there isn't a whole lot of career mobility outside of teaching, but it will be extremely fulfilling if you happen to really love teaching and shaping young minds in such a way that'll actually impact their future and inspire some levels of interest in some areas that they might have not have known about as well. But it might not necessarily provide some of the other opportunities that some of the STEM grads might have that are specific to their field of study. Another really popular area that people gravitate towards is actually law school, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One of the biggest reasons is the fact that a lot of people feel as though if they go into a history degree, they know exactly what to expect. They can put in a lot of work and a lot of time into a degree and get a very high GPA at the end of it. And that happens to be one of the most important components of a law school application package. And as I'm sure you all know, as it was covered in one of my previous videos as well, law school doesn't necessarily require a specific major, but they actually look at a couple of other things. And so having a very high GPA is going to be something extremely useful. But something that goes hand in hand with this is really the fact that a history degree is going to help somebody build a lot of the skills that are going to make them very effective in the LSAT. And the LSAT is also another really important component of the law school admissions as well. And so having these two components be potentially very, very strong might make somebody very competitive for this type of career direction. Now, of course, law school is an extremely big investment, both financial and the time investment that comes along with that. So it isn't a career route that's for everyone, but it happens to be one of the fields that a lot of people in the liberal arts, but specifically history, also gravitate towards as well. Now, the next area is going to be probably the most ideal area for somebody who's really a history buff and who really is passionate about the field. The problem with this specific area is the fact that there aren't a whole lot of career opportunities, and the hiring here isn't nearly as much as it would be in some of the other areas. And this would actually just be working at historical sites or museums as are a great example of this as well, either domestically or internationally as well. Now, again, the problem with this is there aren't a whole lot of hiring opportunities opportunities that come from this specific route. There isn't a whole lot of churn in these specific industries, and a lot of these industries are really fueled by volunteers as well. And so even the opportunities within these industries might not even be necessarily as lucrative as you would find within some other fields as well. Also, it's debatable whether or not a history degree is actually needed to get into some of these fields, or whether or not it's something where people can just intern for a period of time or volunteer and work their way into a paid position, perhaps without having a specific history degree as well. So, of course, this is a little bit more of an obscure route to go down as well, but for somebody who's really, really passionate about history in general, it's probably one of the more preferred routes if that's something that they want to spend their entire life in. Now, this kind of goes, it's kind of similar to the next route that I want to say, is a lot of people in the history or the liberal arts, and maybe even the life sciences to a certain degree, feel as though the only career opportunities that are going to be available to them are going to be after their master's or PhD level. And so, for this reason, a lot of history grads feel as though they need to go down a further education route. And so, they need to get their master's, they need to get their PhD, and maybe they don't want to teach at the secondary school level, they want to teach at the community college level, or they want to teach at the university level, and they're going to need further education in order to open up these opportunities for them as well. Now, this route is again not something that's for everyone. Going down the research route is going to be completely different than some of the experiences a student might have in their undergraduate level. It could also be extremely costly depending on whether or not somebody gets funding, so that it is something that is available to them going into that program as well. But also, if somebody isn't going into the teaching field specifically, having a master's degree in history as compared to a bachelor's degree in history might potentially open up a little bit more interview opportunities, but more than likely isn't going to make as dramatic of an impact as someone would expect out of this specific program. So this leads me to one of the final routes that I kind of want to talk about, which is going down kind of a general route. And so what I mean by this is there's a lot of fields, a lot of employment fields out there that don't actually require a specific area of study. A great example of this is the customer service field, or the sales field, whether it's enterprise sales or it's B2B sales, or a bunch of different industries where there's a lot of human interaction. There aren't really specific skills that would have been taught at the undergraduate level that are applicable. So they make use of a lot of on the site training, so to speak. And so somebody will go into a specific organization, go through a series of training modules for a couple of different weeks to train them on the intricacies of the business, how it works, maybe how to sell, how to interact with other departments. And then that'll actually be where they funnel them into the actual role itself. And so the degree itself might be useful as a screening opportunity to determine who might be successful in these training programs, but it isn't going to teach them anything applicable to that specific program. And so this isn't necessarily a knock on history specifically. A lot of these roles might take somebody who's in history and someone who's in science and a bunch of these other fields, depending on whether or not they feel that the candidate is actually the most suitable, and not necessarily what skills can they bring, or what specific knowledge they can bring from their undergraduate program. Maybe even more so just what skills, what traits do they have that are going to make them successful. So something else to consider down that route as well. And so the main takeaways that we want to talk about here is really the fact that coming out of a degree like history, as an example, it's really not going to be a lot of the knowledge that you learn about if you happen to leave the historical field, so to speak. It's going to be a lot of what you can sell your employer on in terms of what skills have you developed and how is it going to maximize your effectiveness in their specific business or in their specific industry. And so this is going to come from a lot of the things that you actually do outside of the class. And so perhaps getting involved in some of the extracurriculars, or getting involved in campus activities, or just getting involved in anything else that's actually going to show initiative and build some of the other practical skills that aren't actually taught within the classroom is going to make somebody stand out as a candidate as compared to some of their counterparts. Another really, really important thing to consider is where you're actually going to school. And this kind of sounds silly to some people, but you'll actually find that if a history grad coming out of an Ivy League institution versus a history grad coming out of a very lesser known state school, as an example, are going to have two completely different career paths that are going to be open up to them. And so, as an example, a lot of the Ivy League institutions will have offers from organizations that might not necessarily care too much about what the candidate's major is, but might look at some other things like SAT scores or what their performance was like in their actual program, what clubs they were involved in, and what skills and initiative they've shown at the undergraduate level that can be applicable to that specific role that they're recruiting for. And so this might be why you might find some history grads or some philosophy grads or sociology grads in like consulting fields, as an example, or even in the banking field, who have come from very prestigious undergraduate programs, even though they happen to fall within the liberal arts. So this is kind of a thing to consider um, as well. It's kind of something that is going to require a little bit of extra work, even if you happen to go to an Ivy League institution, as an example. If you're competing for a position that's going to fall outside of your scope of understanding, particularly if that field requires you to come with a lot of practical knowledge about that specific industry, then you might have to show a lot of other initiatives, maybe getting some types of credentials, taking your level one of your CFA, as an example, if you want to go into banking, getting involved with on campus finance organizations, doing some internships and that type of thing to kind of build your resume outside of what a recruiter would typically see from your undergraduate transcripts. And so, of course, these are other things to consider as well. I don't want people to ever feel as though they're being held hostage by what they majored in at the undergraduate level. Especially if you're going into a career path that doesn't actually specifically require a specific degree, like law, as an example, or dentistry, or something along those lines. I think that it's really about what skills you can exemplify that you've learned and been able to um, master over the period of time that you've been in school, that's going to actually make you stand out as a candidate. So I hope I've covered some really useful things that'll help you going forward. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, if you are a history major and you have any insights that you'd like to provide, I'd love to hear that in the comment section below. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.